A city is held in the grip of fear as a serial killer taunts police with tearful, anonymous confessions, until a courageous survivor unmasks the man behind the monstrous voice. In the quiet, unassuming heartland of America, a chilling new sound began to echo through police dispatch centers in the early 1980s. It was the voice of a killer, but unlike any they had ever encountered. A voice that would weep, whimper, and confess to unspeakable acts, then vanish back into the shadows, leaving behind a trail of terror and a city gripped by an agonizing mystery. This was Minneapolis and Saint Paul, Minnesota. Twin cities known for their friendly demeanor, their vibrant communities, and a sense of security that was about to be shattered. A time before the pervasive fear of serial predators became a grim reality for many American cities. But here, in the heart of the Midwest, a new kind of monster was emerging. One that didn't just commit heinous crimes, but reveled in a twisted public display of false remorse. This will be known as the Weepy-Voiced Killer, a phantom figure whose calls to the police were as disturbing as the murders themselves. Each call a macabre performance, a desperate plea for capture that was never truly meant to be answered. This is the story of Paul Michael Stephani, the man behind the voice, the victims he terrorized, and the courageous woman who ultimately brought his reign of terror to an end. The first chilling act of the Weepy-Voiced Killer unfolded on New Year's Eve, 1980. Karen Potak, a young woman in Saint Paul, Minnesota, became his initial victim. The attack was brutal, leaving her with severe wounds and a brain injury. It was a violent introduction to the terror that would soon grip the Twin Cities. But what made this attack, and those that followed, uniquely disturbing was the killer's macabre ritual. At 3 a.m., after leaving Karen Potak for dead, Paul Michael Stephani himself called the police. His voice, high-pitched and seemingly distraught, directed them to the scene of his crime. "There is a girl hurt there," he whimpered, a chilling prelude to the anonymous confessions that would define his reign of terror. This was the beginning of a terrifying pattern. The police, initially baffled by the anonymous tip, soon realized they were dealing with a predator who not only committed horrific acts, but also inserted himself into the aftermath, taunting them with his feigned remorse. The investigation had begun, but the identity of the Weepy-Voiced Killer remained shrouded in mystery, leaving the community vulnerable and on edge. The chilling prelude of Karen Potak's attack soon escalated into a full-blown nightmare. On June 3, 1981, Kimberly Compton, an 18-year-old student from Pepin, Wisconsin, became the Weepy-Voiced Killer's next victim in Minneapolis. Her brutal murder sent a wave of fear through the community, but it was the killer's subsequent actions that truly amplified the terror.
Goddamn, will you find me? I just stabbed somebody with an ice pick. I can't stop myself. I keep killing somebody.
This was the killer's chilling confession, delivered directly to the police. 2 days later, he called again, promising to turn himself in, a promise he never kept. On June 6th, He called to correct newspaper accounts of the murders, demonstrating a perverse engagement with the public narrative of his crimes. And then, on June 11th, another call, filled with what sounded like genuine anguish.
I'm sorry for what I did to Compton.
These calls, a bizarre blend of confession and manipulation, intensified the public's fear and the police's frustration. The Weepy-Voiced Killer was not just a murderer, he was a psychological tormentor, using his voice to amplify the horror of his deeds and taunt those who sought to bring him to justice. The Twin Cities were now on high alert, gripped by the terrifying reality that a remorseless killer was among them, broadcasting his crimes with a chilling, tearful plea. The terror continued to escalate. After Kimberly Compton, 2 more women fell victim to the Weepy-Voiced Killer, Kathleen Greening and Barbara Simons. These murders, though not immediately accompanied by the killer's signature calls, were later confirmed to be his work, deepening the mystery and the fear that gripped the Twin Cities. Kathleen Greening was found dead in her home just outside Saint Paul. Years later, Paul Michael Stephani would confess to drowning her in her bathtub in Roseville, a chilling detail that painted a picture of calculated brutality. Barbara Simons, a 40-year-old nurse, met Stephani at the Hexagon Bar. Her last known words to a waitress, a hopeful sentiment, would become tragically ironic.
He's cute. I hope he's nice, since he's giving me a ride home.
The next day, Barbara Simons was found stabbed to death. And then the calls resumed, more disturbing than before.
Please don't talk, just listen. I'm sorry I killed that girl. I stabbed her 40 times. Kimberly Compton was the first one over in Saint Paul.
The chilling details, the specific number of stab wounds, the reference to his first victim, these were not the words of a man seeking help, but a predator reveling in his power, leaving a breadcrumb trail of terror for the authorities to follow. The pressure on law enforcement intensified with each new victim, each new call. The Weepy-Voiced Killer was becoming a legend of fear, and the Twin Cities held its breath, wondering who would be next. For the investigators of the Minneapolis and Saint Paul police departments, the case of the Weepy-Voiced Killer was unlike any they had ever encountered. Traditional forensic methods yielded little. There were no fingerprints, no clear witnesses, and the only consistent lead was the killer's own chilling voice, delivered in anonymous phone calls. The calls themselves became the primary evidence. Detectives meticulously analyzed every nuance of the killer's voice, its high pitch, the whimpering tone, the feigned remorse. They consulted with psychologists and linguists, attempting to build a profile of a man who seemed to be simultaneously confessing and taunting, seeking attention while remaining elusive. The psychological profile that emerged was complex and disturbing. A manipulative individual, likely suffering from deep-seated psychological issues, who found a perverse satisfaction in his twisted game with law enforcement. The public, meanwhile, grew increasingly anxious. Every anonymous phone call, every news report fueled the fear that the Weepy-Voiced Killer could strike anywhere, at any time. The pressure on the police was immense, but without a face to put to the voice, the hunt continued in the dark. As the Weepy-Voiced Killer continued his reign of terror, a glimmer of hope, and ultimately the key to his undoing, emerged from the most unexpected of places. Her name was Denise Williams, a 19-year-old sex worker navigating the dangerous streets of Minneapolis. On August 21, 1982, Denise Williams encountered Paul Michael Stephani. What began as a seemingly routine encounter quickly turned sinister. As Stephani drove her away from the city into a dark, suburban area, Denise sensed the grave danger she was in. Turning onto a dead-end road, Stephani attacked her, attempting to stab her with a screwdriver. But Denise Williams was not like his previous victims. She fought back with incredible ferocity, a desperate struggle for survival against a man who had, until now, seemed unstoppable. In a moment of sheer courage and quick thinking, she managed to hit Stephani on the head with a glass bottle, causing him to bleed and momentarily disorienting him. Her screams pierced the night, drawing the attention of a nearby resident who intervened, wrestling with Stephani and forcing him to flee. Denise, bleeding but alive, was able to call for an ambulance. It was the call that would change everything. When Stephani, bleeding from the head wound inflicted by Denise, sought medical help, that act inadvertently confirmed his identity as the elusive Weepy-Voiced Killer. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, linking him not only to the attack on Denise, but also to the murder of Barbara Simons. The hunt was finally over.
The capture of Paul Michael Stephani sent shockwaves through the Twin Cities. The man who had terrorized the community with his chilling, anonymous calls was finally unmasked. The initial sense of relief was palpable, but it was quickly replaced by a dawning realization. The unassuming man in the mugshot was the very same individual whose whimpering voice had haunted their nights. Stephani's arrest was a direct result of Denise Williams' incredible bravery and the subsequent medical attention he sought for the injuries she inflicted. The police, now with a suspect in custody, began to piece together the full extent of his crimes. The calls, once a source of frustration and confusion, now became crucial evidence confirming his identity as the Weepy-Voiced Killer. The public struggled to reconcile the image of the seemingly ordinary man with the monstrous acts he committed and the bizarre, remorseful persona he adopted during his calls. The unmasking of the Weepy-Voiced Killer brought a sense of closure to a terrifying chapter in the Twin Cities' history, but it also left lingering questions about the dark depths of the human psyche and the motivations behind such a twisted game of cat and mouse. With Paul Michael Stephani in custody, the focus shifted to the courtroom. The legal proceedings against him were a culmination of tireless investigative work and the harrowing testimony of survivors. While Stephani was initially charged and convicted for the attempted murder of Denise Williams and the assault of Douglas Panning, the shadow of the Weepy-Voiced Killer loomed large over the proceedings. The trial revealed the brutal nature of Stephani's attacks. Denise Williams' courageous testimony was central, detailing the terrifying struggle that ultimately led to his identification. The prosecution painted a picture of a vicious and unprovoked attacker, highlighting the extreme cruelty of his actions. The court rejected any notion of mitigating factors, emphasizing the deliberate and violent nature of his crimes. Stephani was sentenced to a significant prison term, a double presumptive sentence for the attempted murder of Williams, and a consecutive sentence for the assault of Douglas Panning. While these convictions brought a measure of justice for the attacks he was caught committing, the full scope of his murderous spree remained officially unacknowledged by him at this time.
Years later,
In 1997, a new chapter in the Weepy-Voiced Killer saga began to unfold. Paul Michael Stephani, now incarcerated, received a terminal diagnosis: skin cancer. With less than a year to live, the man who had meticulously hidden his darkest secrets for so long finally decided to speak. From his prison bed at Oak Park Heights, Stephani began to confess. Not just to the crimes for which he was convicted, but to the murders that had haunted the Twin Cities for years, the killings of Kimberly Compton, Kathleen Greening, and Barbara Simons, as well as the brutal attack on Karen Potak. These were the crimes that had been attributed to the elusive Weepy-Voiced Killer, and now the voice itself was confirming them. His confessions, made in the shadow of his own mortality, brought a chilling closure to these cold cases. For the families of the victims, it was a bittersweet moment, the confirmation of what they had long suspected, but also a painful reopening of old wounds. For the investigators, it was the final piece of a puzzle that had consumed their lives for years.
I'm sorry I killed that girl. I stabbed her 40 times. Kimberly Compton was the first one over in Saint Paul.
The motivations behind these deathbed confessions remain a subject of psychological debate. Was it genuine remorse, a desperate attempt at redemption in the face of impending death? Or was it a final manipulative act, a last bid for control and attention from a man who had always sought to orchestrate his own narrative? Regardless of the motive, Stephani's confessions finally laid bare the full, horrific truth of the Weepy-Voiced Killer.
Paul Michael Stephani died on June 12, 1998, at Oak Park Heights Prison, taking with him the full, unvarnished truth of his inner world. But the legacy of the Weepy-Voiced Killer and the terror he inflicted continues to resonate. His case remains a chilling study in criminal psychology, a testament to the unpredictable nature of human darkness. The psychological analysis of Stephani's behavior, particularly his bizarre phone calls, continues to fascinate and disturb. Was it a cry for help, a twisted form of guilt, or a calculated act of manipulation? The duality of his seemingly remorseful voice and his brutal actions presents a perplexing paradox, a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving. But beyond the morbid fascination with the killer, the true legacy of this case lies in the lives forever altered. The victims, Karen Potak, Kimberly Compton, Kathleen Greening, and Barbara Simons, are not just statistics. They were individuals with lives, dreams, and families who endured unimaginable pain. And then there is Denise Williams, whose extraordinary courage in the face of unimaginable terror not only saved her own life, but ultimately brought a serial killer to justice. The Weepy-Voiced Killer case serves as a stark reminder of the ever-present struggle between good and evil, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring quest for justice. It is a story that continues to echo, a chilling whisper from the past, reminding us that even in the most ordinary of places, extraordinary darkness can lurk, and the most unexpected voices can carry the most profound and unsettling truths.